Uh, so, part 4. It's now the end of June. We've got 27 days, I think, till we open. 29th of June. Stephen Daldry talks to me after the production meeting, leaning against a pillar with a fag on and his appealing wry smile. It's all a bit messy at the moment, I think, he said. I've already told Danny this, but then Danny is a bit messy, and I think that's sort of what he wants. He's so cool as Stephen, always smiling even in the midst of a crisis, of which there seem to be many. Although he's a well-known and brilliant film director in his own right, Stephen's job is really to deal with the politics, to run interference, as the Americans would say, and to keep the heat off Danny so he can get on with just conceiving and directing the show. Stephen seems to thrive on it. He's very funny, camp on occasion, gentle and quiet on others, and just a pure delight to be around. One of those people into whose orbit you happily allow yourself to be drawn. We programmed tonight with all the house lights out, and for the first time I allow myself to admit that it looks beautiful and spectacular. How can that be? The same lights, the same space, the same cues. It's just that the combination of small fixes makes for a complete whole. When it all comes together, there's magic, and it's enormous and very real. I leave at midnight with some confidence. 30th of June, another big production meeting with James Lee in charge of the complex flying system, looking very stressed. A lot of his equipment isn't working properly, and Danny is constantly adding more flying cues all the time. James's responsibility is enormous, life literally hanging under his control, but he still keeps an up vibe. The producers, in the form of Catherine and Piers, clearly want to give Danny everything he asks for, but they have to also keep some idea of balance in terms of both the money he's spending and the practicality of his requests. These are usually preempted by Danny or his producer Tracy asking, I wonder if we can just have another, or I think it would be very beautiful for the audience if we could just add a... 1st of July. Saeed picks me up in the morning and drives me back down to Bath for a glorious 2 days at home while I read the papers. On page 3 of the Sunday Times, there is a complete rundown of the show, including staging details, music, description of effects and performers. No! How could they? The press were just shameless, really. And I've talked to a few journalists and editors since then, and they said, look, when the thing is coming together, it's a story. And the story is, are they going to make it or not? And we're digging into that, you know. But if the thing is great, we're going to give it 5 stars. It didn't seem to think that, I was being naive and not understanding the process. It happened with the Millennium Dome as well. I remember that. They just spent the whole time slagging it off and just said, well, don't worry, opening night, we'll give it a good review. And we don't really care what people remember or don't remember about what we read. Shameless, really. 3rd of July 2012. I decide it's dangerous leaving my scooter so exposed when it's parked outside the security gate at White Post Lane. So I knock on the door of the Performance Space warehouse a few yards down the road. Very hippie scene inside, with 2 or 3 young artists in paint-splattered jumpsuits and ratty hair making some complicated piece out of coloured plastic tubes in the bare concrete shell of the building. I ask who's in charge, and I'm directed to a gamin crop-haired girl with tattoos and a lip ring, who's sitting at a makeshift desk at a grubby Apple Mac laptop. She's got a great smile, which gets wider as I introduce myself and offer her £25 a week to chain my scooter to her building for the next 3 months. Oh, we'll be down the pub tonight then, said one of the hippies, a Dutchman, and there's easy laughter. The girl, whose name turns out to be Bean, tells me that the other 3 cars outside are also from people who work at the Olympics. That's how we make our money nowadays, she said. Car parking and not art. 4th of July. Dramas revealed by the mass cast department, who say they've heard rumblings that some of the performers are talking about rushing the tour at the end of their segment and putting themselves up there for the last tableau so they can be on TV. It's funny and anarchic, but also serious in terms of safety. But the idea that after all this great bonding with Danny, some of the volunteers would actually rebel and disobey orders is a bit alarming. 5th of July. Lots of people coming up to me and the team in the afternoon saying how much they're enjoying our work, the volunteers, the technical crew and so on. I take the compliments graciously, but try hard not to let it cloud my own view of what we're doing. When you're sure that what you're doing is right, these sort of affirmations are useful. But when you don't quite have it yet, the testimonials only point up one's doubts. There's still a lot for us to do. I watched the run from the podium level for the first time, and it does look breathtaking. All the work from last night has paid dividends, and everything feels much tighter and more exciting. The TV pictures look spectacular as well, and now the story starts to make some sort of sense. At the meeting after the run, Danny begins with the pronouncement on the lighting, which he says is completely spectacular. He says he knows about the long hours we're putting in overnight and asks that I pass this on to all our team. This is important for us, because not only does it convey a sense of confidence from the director, always important when you're making a piece of work that you want somebody else to like and approve of, but because it's a huge fillip to our team. Terry passes Danny's words on to our operators as they get ready to leave after hours spent up in the open and the cold on the roof of the stadium. Most of them are lighting students from the theatre colleges around London. They're made up a treat. 6th of July, miserable, unremitting wet weather when we wake. Lucy is up for a few days and we have coffee in the wheelhouse with the rain drumming a light conga on the new tarpaulin. It's pretty much been like this for every day for the last 2 months, and I dread to think what it would be like at the stadium. My boat in London, Allura, is, we don't own her anymore, but it was a 72-foot Dutch barge, a new build Dutch barge that we had built down here by a friend in Bath. And this was my home, my sanctuary, my oasis, my safe place that I was in for 3 months, basically. And my wife, Lucy, would come up every few days to fill the fridge and take the laundry back and hug me and give me words of encouragement. So Laura was an important part of my life. 7th of July. Still troubled on the way into work. Problems to fix. I don't feel quite in control. Tim shows me the cues that he and the team finished last night. Still a bit messy to my mind, and for the first time he's defensive in his response. We run with the company in half daylight in the evening and the lighting looks only okay and nothing really strong. Tim's adamant we shouldn't be judging our work by the images on the we should be judging our work by the images on the TV monitors in our control room and not on the view down to the field. Of course, he's right that the majority of our audience will be watching the show on their televisions at home on the night. But that's not the point at this relatively early stage in the process. Until the cues and the concept is solid in the live forum, we cannot judge the TV pictures, and certainly not under the wrong lighting conditions. We wait until it's completely dark, run the cues again, and it looks great. Tim and I catch each other's eye across the crowded control room and smile. What's to worry about? 9th of July. Sitting in the wheelhouse on the boat in the morning, I go on YouTube to see if there's any leaked footage of our rehearsals from the last week. There's been talk of a mole with a camera inside the stadium, and I'm interested to see if this is rumour or something more real. Automatically, I get linked to images from Beijing, and I'm reminded of just how amazing and dramatic that ceremony looked. Instinctively, I turn off the pictures. Fuck, that show looks so great. It feels like ours doesn't come close to theirs in terms of spectacle and scale. All I can think of is that our whole production is grittier and more rock and roll, and if that's England now, then that's how it should be. God, another 3 weeks of this. In the control room, next day, in the control room, there's a sense of serious intent as everyone prepares for the first pass of the helicopter stunt. If you remember, the helicopter takes off from Buckingham Palace. James Bond, hello Mr. Bond. The helicopter takes off, it flies up on VT over the stadium. At that point we switch to live VT, and after everyone's sure that the helicopter's in the right place, 2 people jump out of the helicopter. There's a 5-second clip of VT that runs in the live, which is James Bond giving the thumbs up to the Queen, and boom, they're both gone live and land. It's a big deal, very complicated to do. Very complicated to do safely. Everyone's in the control room and I go down there for the first time watching this. All communication from the stadium to the helicopter, and even from Danny himself, has to go through the aircraft liaison person, cannot be called directly by Julia. She's a very cool and collected squadron leader from the RAF called Dawn. When Danny asks for a different direction of approach from the chopper or a fast climb in altitude, Dawn takes it all in until she's absolutely sure what is required, and then succinctly and calmly sends the information up to Mark Wolfe, the helicopter pilot. He tries 3 or 4 approaches, but because of the weather, the jump itself is aborted. We've brought in a powerful spotlight to test if we can actually light the aircraft from nearly 1,000 feet away. And although it's daylight, we can just make out the glint of light on the fuselage, and we know we'll be all right. 5th of July. Bit of sunshine this morning, and the added delight of Lucy arriving at 11 o'clock looking lovely. She puts on the first load of laundry, and then we head off to Le Colombier for lunch with the girls as a treat. The restaurant is straight out of the south of France, and little Laura said, "It's like being on holiday, isn't it?" But with some poignancy, I realise this is actually as close as we'll get to having a holiday together this year. The helicopter is over again tonight, this time for 3 more passes, and on the last one, 2 black dots exit the copter exactly on cue. They pull their ripcords. The Union Jack shoots open perfectly as the James Bond theme plays through the PA. Da-da, da-da. The assembled volunteer class of perhaps 1,000 people who are in tonight all burst into loud cheers. I meet the jumpers an hour later and talk through how the lighting felt to them. It's a big deal if they're jumping out the helicopter and we're lighting with spotlights all the way around, but we get the wind direction just before the helicopter takes off. We get that directly, and that goes into my ear here. At that point, I can tell Terry they're approaching from the west, so we can have no spotlights from the east. So, 12 of those lights go out and the other 24 stay on. So we were very involved in this. It was exciting. But I want to know what it was like for the jumpers, whether they were blinded or not. I meet the jumpers an hour later and talk through how the lighting felt to them. Gary Connery, the main guy who'll be taking the role of the Queen, is very careful. "Well, I know what I think, but I don't want to influence Mark," he says, referring to his jumping partner, Mark Sutton, who plays James Bond. "Perhaps he should step aside while I tell you what I think, and then he can give you his own opinion. I realise this is all about allowing Mark to make his own decision on something that is potentially a life and death call." Mark says to Gary to go ahead anyway. "Well," says Gary slowly, "I know that if the helicopter is over the centre of the arena, and I know the angle that it's facing, and I know when I'm going to pull my chute, then I don't have to see what's below. When I'm floating, when I've deployed the parachute, when I'm floating, then I need to see the lighting towers on the side of the arena so he can make his escape." I ask Mark what he thinks. He smiles. "Well, Gary's first out, so basically I'll just follow him. I'll be fine," he says. And sadly, Mark Sutton died a year later in a base jump, the mad, jumping off mountains and flying in a jumpsuit, and he got it wrong and he died. Very sad. And on that note, end of part 4.